Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be giving you some final top tips for English Language Paper 2 and how you can boost your grade in the last minute, and I'll give you loads of good advice for each of the questions and just some general exam technique advice. So let's just get straight into it. The first thing is that you do need to revise English language. Although it seems a bit more obvious how to revise literature, there are loads of things that you can do to improve your language grade. So people that say that you can't revise for it are wrong. Just don't listen to them. Good writing is a skill that can be learned, and there are a bunch of tips I'm going to give you that will help you improve the mark that you get drastically in just a few days. So getting straight into the structure of the paper, there are 5 questions. The first 4 are in section A, and the last question, question 5, is section B. Of course, you'd know section A is reading and section B is writing. So it's an hour and 45, at least for AQA. It should be similar for other exam boards. So you have a 4 marker, an 8 marker, 12 marker, 16 marker, and then finally the 40 mark essay at the end. I'm going to be explaining how to maximize your marks on each of the questions because they are quite different in the technique that you need to approach them with. Now, before you even actually start to answer any of the questions, I would say read them all. Before you even read the extract, read the questions, just have a quick glance through so that you have an idea of what kind of things you need to be focusing on when you read. And then based on that, you want to spend 10 minutes reading both of the extracts. I don't know if you're allowed a highlighter, but I would say use a pen to underline the most important parts based on the questions that you've just read. And what I would do is underline the parts of the extract that were relevant for each question, and then label and just write question 2, question 3, question 4. Super easy, because when you get to that question, flick to the extract, most of the relevant parts are underlined for you already. So it's just a good hack. Then question 1. So this is a 4 mark question. You need to, there are loads of statements. I think there are 8 statements, and you need to select the ones that are true. So yes, this is the easiest question in the paper, but don't get complacent. Make sure you've read all of the statements very carefully, because there are always 1 or 2 statements that are there just designed to trip you up. So be careful, don't spend any longer than 4-5 minutes on that question. Question 2, you should spend around 10 minutes on, and this is a question where you have to summarize both of the text, and it's a comparative one. So again, make sure you are talking about both of the extracts equally, and remember, do not do language or structural analysis on this question. You're simply analyzing the content. So you're not analyzing how the writer has written the extract, but rather what they're writing about. I remember being quite confused for the structure of this question, but it's really quite simple. You need to identify 3 to 4 similarities or differences, depending on the question, between the 2 extracts, and then just write those as separate points. But the key thing to remember is you need to be talking about inferences. So what is an inference? A lot of students lose marks on this question because they don't fully understand what that word really means when their teachers just say it to them, and they don't really get it. An inference is anything that you can work out from the text that is not directly said. So it's basically the layers of understanding that you need to work out from reading between the lines in the text. So the writer might not explicitly say a certain thing, but you can work it out from the context that you're given. And the key thing is that you want to be making sure you're not just restating what the writer has said, because you won't get marks for that. It's not inference. Inference is, you want to be judicious and think about what can I actually work out from what they've given me that they haven't actually said. It's basically an educated guess, but remember, don't stretch the meaning too far. Sometimes you can see people writing things that are just not reasonable to estimate from what they've given. My best advice is that if you think of an inference that might be a stretch but you're not really sure, just write it, especially if you can't think of many other points. A lot of the time, a lot of other people might be writing the same thing. There's only a certain amount of things that you can say for a given extract. And also, the examiners will be more pleased to see you trying to make a good inference, rather than just restating the obvious and not making an attempt. So don't simply reword the source, and try to use 2 to 3 quotes per point. The next question is question 3, and you want to spend around 12 minutes on this question. It's always worded as, how does the writer use language to describe? And then there's whatever topic of interest that they've decided to give you. And this is a question focusing on one of the sources. It could be source A or source B. So this question, unlike question 2, is all about language. You need to talk about the language techniques that you've learned. You know, there'll be a full list. I'll link a video in the description to loads of great language techniques that you can pick up on and analyze the effect of. So use accurate subject terminology to identify specific language techniques that the writers use, because they'll only give you a source if there is enough to talk about. Sometimes there might be a tough one here and there. Some years you get an extract where there's not always a massive amount to talk about, but they have to give the grades to someone. So if you pick up on something, even if you think that it's just a minor thing, talk about it. Try and pick up as many techniques as you can. So you want to explain and comment on how the writer uses language and structure to have an effect on the reader, to influence the reader. And this question is often about the writer, emotions, how something is represented, but yeah, it's often about feelings and emotions. So make sure that you look at all the past papers and understand what kind of topics could they ask me questions on, and then sort of learn the chains of reasoning for how you can link a certain language technique or structural technique to the effect that the writer might be having, because there are some parallels you can draw between different extracts. But yeah, this is the non-fiction paper, so make sure that you are keeping it real to what's actually written in the text. And also make sure that you are sticking to the lines that they've given you. Don't use quotes from outside the selected part of the extract, because you just won't get credited for the reference to the text. Question 4 is the 16 marker, so try not to spend around 20 minutes on this question, depending on how long you've spent on the ones before. Nothing is out of scope for this question, so you can talk about language, structure, whatever else you want to talk about. But yeah, again, this is a comparison of both of the extracts. However, this time you're using the whole extract. So try and think about how the extract changes over time, and make sure you're analyzing the writer's viewpoints. Almost put yourself in the writer's shoes and think about how they might be feeling, but obviously contextualize it to the question that they've given you. I would suggest doing about 4 points, and at each point linking to both the first and the second extract, comparing the viewpoints. And this question is also often about feelings and emotions of the writer, so make sure you know terminology to describe emotions and feelings, and you can find that online or in any other resources. An underrated tip for this question is to actually plan your answer very briefly. What I would do is just very quickly just jot down what points of comparison I would make for this question in the top corner, and then like cross it out later or whatever. But basically you want to make sure you have enough points to write the full, get all the full 16 marks. You can talk about how a certain aspect of the text is different in one source versus the other source. Structure each of your paragraphs as you normally would, with a topic sentence, evidence, so loads of quotes and references to the text, and then finally your analysis, so looking at the effects of that on the reader. But yeah, make sure you talk about structure and language. And yeah, use a broad range of quotes. Try to put 3, 4, maybe even 5 short quotes in each of your paragraphs, so that it's clear that you've understood which parts of the text are relevant to your points. And then you should do a short conclusion summarizing the main points that you've made and the perspectives of the writers. And then finally, question 5. You have around 48 minutes left at this point, but I would suggest spending around 5 minutes at the start planning, at least 5 minutes, because this is a question where you need to be persuasive, the persuasive writing, unlike paper 1, which was creative writing. You need to write, it's usually a newspaper article or a speech or something of that kind of nature, to persuade a certain audience for your viewpoint. Now, the first thing is, it doesn't need to be your viewpoint. When you're planning and you're drawing up a table of agree and disagree, or whichever 2 sides you need to discuss, just pick the side that has more points. Pick the side that has better points, because in the end, the examiner doesn't care what you actually think. You just need to be able to write in a really convincing way. So if one of the sides has more points, stronger points, and you think that you could argue them better, or you have a great idea for how you could convey that message, definitely go for that side. And remember, this is persuasive writing. It's not an evaluation of anything. It's you giving your opinion, and then when you give the counter argument, you shut it down immediately. You're not balancing 2 arguments, and then your conclusion is not on balance, this. You need to be quite strong in your opinion. Don't just give two sides, paragraphs for and against, and then a conclusion. When you introduce those points against, use wording like, some might say, however, this is completely, and then completely wrong because X, Y, and Z. So make sure that you are making it convincing. Use ambitious vocabulary and use persuasive techniques. I'll link down below to a document to loads of persuasive techniques that you can use to enhance your writing. And you can work through that and sort of try and implement it in your text as much as possible. Don't skip planning because it's key to a consistent argument and a structured argument, which is what the examiners are looking for. So yeah, use the fanciest vocabulary and phrases and idioms that you know here, because that's what the examiners are looking for. And yeah, make sure that you're confident with it though. Don't use stuff that you're not fully sure with, because it's better to not use it rather than use it in the wrong way. And finally, match the style of your writing to the audience that you're trying to convey your message to. This is super important. I think it's said on the mark schemes, and your teacher will tell you this for sure. But you'll be told which audience you are writing for, whether it be adults, students your age, or anyone else. Make sure that you are writing in a way that makes sense. If you're talking to adults, and especially it also matters which type of adults you're talking to. If you're talking to teachers, you want to be very respectful, understanding, and yeah, all those sorts of things. But if you're talking to students, put in some jokes, put in some whatever informal language you want to use, obviously without being rude, to make it actually sound like you're talking to students. Just keep it realistic to what you would actually do and what you would actually say. And yeah, don't go too formal if you think that the audience is not appropriate for that kind of tone. And yeah, as I said, putting in jokes or making the speech more relatable if you're talking to students your age can be a very, very good sign for the examiner, because it makes it so clear that you're actually understanding who you're talking to. So I would say at least once or twice in your writing, show very clearly that you have understood who you are talking to, because once the examiner's seen that, they'll just tick it off and you get the marks. Don't ignore SPAG as well. There are 16 marks for technical accuracy, and getting the basics right gives you like so many free easy marks, so don't neglect it. And yeah, make sure that you spend that time well. You might want to leave about 3 to 5 maximum minutes at the end to check over your work, not just for question 5, but also for the rest of the paper. Make sure that you've included the right number of points, the right number of quotes, and yeah, you should be good. It's a time-pressured paper. I struggle with time pressure, but it's definitely a one that is doable once you have a look at what kind of things are expected of you. You can look at model answers, and I'll link to some great resources down below for notes on how to answer each question, the strategy, and there's also some model answers that you can look at. But make sure that you're doing full practice papers as well, because you need to get a good sense of timing. And yeah, do as many as you can. Try to write as much persuasive writing as you can between now and the exam. And yeah, that's my advice. So for the final top tips, Section A for reading, read the questions carefully, read the texts carefully, and underline the key parts that you want to use in your answers. And for Section B, which is the writing, use paragraphs, clear paragraphs to get you those technical accuracy marks for a switching topic or tone. And you might even want to put in like one-line paragraphs if you're trying to be very dramatic, for example. But yeah, make sure that you address the counter-argument and then refute it, and make sure that you are planning your response in advance and timing yourself well, because at this point in the paper you might be on quite a crunch for time. But yeah, it doesn't need to be super long. You don't need to fill all the space at all. As long as the quality is there and you've got a decent amount of quantity, you should be good. So yeah, don't have any limiting beliefs that you think, just because paper 1 didn't go well, or just because, I feel like I'm not a very good writer, that you won't be able to do well in this paper, because genuinely there's so much you can do to improve in a short period of time. And I've seen people who, improved drastically and improved their marks hugely for paper 2 especially. So yeah, that's all the advice I have for today. If you enjoyed this video, do like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Good luck for your exams.